Thanks everybody for joining. Welcome to Accessibility NYC. I'm Ben Ogilvy, one of the co-organizers of the meetup. And shout out to my other co-organizers, Thomas Logan in the back, Cameron Cundiff, who couldn't be here today, and joining remotely and managing the online group is Meryl Evans. Also, thanks to Irina Morozova. I need to get better at that. Morozova. Sorry, Irina, who you may have seen at the door downstairs, helping folks up. We do live stream all of our meetups, including this one. So smile, you may be on camera. Thanks to Jolie McPhee from the Internet Society of New York Accessibility Special Interest Group for broadcasting the event. We also caption all of our events, which we seem to have a little bit misaligned here, Jolly. Also thanks to Ira for providing live ASL interpretation for the event. If you'd like a visual interpreter for the event, you can download the Ira Explorer app on the App Store or Google Play, and the A11Y NYC geofence should apply automatically, so you can navigate and you can use the access offer A11Y NYC if you benefit from that. Meryl will be fielding questions on YouTube, which is youtube.com/A11YNYC. And feel free to join the chat there. And we also will have time for questions at the end. We do want to thank our sponsors. Ira, which is an app that connects people who are blind or low vision to professional visual interpreters for secure access to visual information anytime, anywhere. AKQA, which graciously offers the space that we're in tonight. They are a global digital agency and innovation agency. DQ, leader in digital accessibility tools, services, and training. Equal Entry, digital accessibility consultancy focused on results. Evinced, the software for accessible development. And Fable, an accessibility platform powered by people with disabilities. So tonight we've got Tom Kamber speaking with us. He is the Executive Director of Older Adults Technology Services, or OATS, and Senior Planet from AARP. Thanks, Tom, for joining us today. Take it away.
We're green. All right. Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Jolie, for getting me to do this. Jolie was like, do you want to talk to a group? I said, sure. It was like 6 months ago, and here I am. I'm going to talk a bit about, I started OATS 20 years ago. So I'm kind of an interesting case study in longevity in the field and I guess stickiness in a career. And we've learned a little bit along the way about building an institution around digital inclusion. So I'll give a little bit of the history of that, and then I'll give a little snapshot of what we're doing kind of today. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we've learned about particularly older adults as a population demographic in terms of how people use tech and how we can think about being more inclusive. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Fair? All right. So my background with digital inclusion goes back to, I had a job, my first job out of college, on 40 Prince Street, which is like 2 blocks from here. And I used to come down here, work for a group called Urban Homesteading Assistance Board. And our job was to help low-income tenant associations renovate abandoned city properties and turn them into low-income co-ops, affordable co-ops. And the co-ops had these community rooms. And around 1993 or so, one of our staff leaders came by and said, we are working with the federal government on this really cool thing called the Technology Opportunities Program, and we're going to go put like, you know, desktop PC stations in some of the community rooms in the co-ops. So all the way back in 1993, there was kind of an effort to think about community technology. We were coming out of a community development framework, so there was kind of a housing and services model. And at that time, the thinking was empower the organizations by getting some technology into their spaces so that the tenants associations could manage their bookkeeping and their planning and work with communications and things. And also, some people could also gain some job skills around it, and it was meant to be sort of a service development program as well. So I worked with that. That was like the first federal involvement in doing something around digital inclusion. And that more or less sunsetted after 2 or 3 years. And then there was kind of crickets for a number of years And I started OATS in 2004 when I was working in Lower Manhattan after 9/11, and we were building a website to try to bring residents and businesses back into the community. A lot of people still live in Lower Manhattan, as you probably know, and back then it was really a challenge to get folks to be able to, get dry cleaning and restaurants and stuff kind of rekindled. So we created a website, and I got a phone call from an 87-year-old woman who said, I'm really interested in coming to this web launch party, but I don't really know what the web is, and I don't know if I would feel welcome. And I was like a community activist, so when you say you think you might not feel welcome to my event, it kind of set off a bell. And I asked her name, which was Pearl, and I said, come find me at the event and I will teach you whatever you need to know. I was all cavalier, And so she comes, and one thing leads to another, and at 8 o'clock and on the next Monday morning, she shows up at my office for like a volunteer tutoring session, and she's got her breakfast wrapped up in a napkin. And I say, Pearl, okay, so this is the mouse, and I want you to point at that button on the website and see if you can click at it. And she takes the mouse and she picks it up off the desk and she starts pointing it. And I was like, okay, put the mouse back down on the desk. And but it was a moment because it really got me to understand that my framework wasn't her framework. I was the first generation of people that I grew up in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And I remember on the boardwalk going to the arcade and watching them take out the old like pinball machines and analog arcade games and replace them with asteroids and the digital interfaces. So my generation of high school students was the first group that played Pong, and the notion that you're manipulating a mouse or something on your desk and you're watching it on the screen was kind of second nature to me by 2004. But Pearl had never done that. She literally never worked a joystick in her life, had never had that experience. So just the notion of an input device and where she was coming from presented me with some real challenges. And so we worked together for about a year. And I realized that she was really taking off. She was founding a synagogue in Lower Manhattan. She was harassing the local public officials by email. They were calling me and telling me to stop, And I was like, keep at him, keep at him. She got a bus shelter in front of the Hallmark down, which is kind of right near where Stuyvesant High School is on I guess it's West Avenue down in Battery Park City. And so she was really kind of flourishing with this. And so I looked around to see what other organizations were working on it, and there aren't a lot of resources for older people trying to get online, which is sort of strange because you think about what old folks are dealing with around mobility and social engagement and economic security and how many resources technology can put at your fingertips. But there's this kind of adoption curve, and older people tend to be on the back end of the adoption curve. And in 2004, only 26% of people over 65 had ever been on the internet. Which is like about a third of the rate for younger people. So I sort of started OATS to try to address that. I was in Park Slope at my kitchen table with my puppy, who then grew into full dog adulthood and has since passed on, but OATS is still here. And the first thing that we did was what today would be called co-design. I saw some people that do UX design here. And I didn't really know how to get something started except to go talk to the people that were the kind of target population. And so I went to the housing groups that I worked with. I went to the resident groups that kind of were the leadership groups. And they were almost all people over 60. And they remembered me from housing. So they said, yeah, we want to work with you on this new project. They didn't really quite know what I was trying to figure out. And I sat down and said, what do you want to learn? And then more importantly, how do you want to learn it? Like, what's the right way from a format standpoint to bring some technology in here, but give you a positive experience? There already were curriculum that showed people how to use the internet, but they were written by, forgive me for the reference, they were written by technology people. And so the first 50 pages were things like how to resize your desktop icons and what the parts of the computer, like that's really important to know, and file management and all these kind of kind of engineering sort of topics. But none of it talked to you about like what is the internet, what is the web, and how do you get email, which is really what people wanted. And so we sat down from scratch and said, well, let's start with that, and how can we get you as quickly as possible to a successful experience? And the courses that were being taught at the time were in the Housing Authority. They were taught every week for 3 hours. It was a 3-hour session. So you went from 2 to 5 p.m., and then you went back a week later, and people had taken the classes, and I interviewed them, they said it's overwhelming. 3 hours is too much. And by the time we come back a week later, we can't remember any of it, and we don't have any real opportunity to figure out how to practice. So we kind of observe people learning, and the men can go for about an hour and a quarter, and then they start peeling off to go to the bathroom. And so that became the limit of the class. Like, let's do an hour and a quarter of classroom time. And then since people need the reinforcement, let's teach twice a week. And then we said, how much, could you afford a class? Could you pay for it? What's the finances around this? And the vast majority of people said, we're already, on fixed incomes. If we want to start using technology, we have to maybe buy a computer or pay for internet. It's overwhelming. And so it's a real barrier to have to pay $20 or $50 or $100 for a class. And so I made the commitment to try to do it for free at the time. And the funders we talked to said, I had funders say, we're not going to give you money because you're giving it away for free, and we don't think you'll sustain the operation. And here we are 20 years later. Many of those people have since retired. But we were able to figure out a sort of revenue model coming from mostly small, like nonprofits that needed community programming. And you would show up and sort of provide a tech program for seniors in their centers, and they would write us sort of small checks, $15,000 for the summer, and we would deliver a class. And I worked with a lot of high school students. So we kind of got it off the ground with this very adaptive curriculum focused on the basics. And it went for 10 weeks. People stretched out for 10 weeks and came to the classes, and we had 90% graduations from people. They really loved it and they really participated. The curriculum was really oriented around what people wanted to learn, and then people started building community out of that. The second level of curriculum that we ended up teaching was not intermediate technology, it was workforce technology, because I asked people why they were there, and 60% of the people in the room said they were looking for jobs. And today the numbers have changed a bit, partly because we're working with a broader population out there, but still between 10 and 30% of older adults that are trying to get online are looking for some way to increase their household revenue, whether it's a job or it's entrepreneurship or it's gig economy or it's managing finances. And so we really ended up focusing a lot on sort of how people use tech for financial purposes. And that became a popular program around the city. We started teaching all over New York City. And then the second wave of federal funding hit. So for some reason, every time there's an economic crisis, the Department of Commerce gets excited about digital inclusion and decides to expand broadband in America as part of their stimulus program. So in 2008, in the Obama era, there was an effort to build more stimulus efforts, and they increased broadband around the country. And as part of those funding patterns, they added money for computer centers and technology training. And so for the first time after we'd started OATS in 2004, so almost 10 years later, we suddenly had access to some federal dollars that might be able to give us resources. We got the city of New York to apply for the grant with us as the sole partner, and then we put up all the matching funds at OATS because everything we did was sort of match eligible. So we got the grant, and in 2013, we opened our first ever center for technology for older adults. It's actually the first technology-themed community center for older adults in America. We did a lot of research. We've never found another one that was there before. And we were very excited about that. It's on 25th Street. It's still there. We are moving it to 30th Street this year, so if you want to see it in transition. And we continue to teach free classes there. And instead of calling it the OATS Center, we realized that people were coming and they wanted to learn the technology, but they really wanted to connect to each other. They were taking a class, and then they were coming to me and saying, I went to the OATS website, and I don't really understand what I'm supposed to do with that. And I said, well, you're not supposed to go to the OATS website. It's set up as more of a corporate nonprofit website. And so we needed a place for people to go, and we created Senior Planet as a kind of landing place for older people that wanted to do something cool. I was listening to hip hop music at the time, and Fear of a Black Planet was the album of the year or something, and I was like, that's so empowering, Senior Planet, like we're taking over and we're gonna, make it ours. And so we called the center Senior Planet, and it was like a resounding success. We got lots of media, we got people from all over the country to come visit, and it really started to create some momentum around what you could do with older adults learning tech. Not so much just because the classes were interesting, but more what people were doing with it. I remember I set up in the corner there with my laptop a lot, and I would just kind of observe and commune with people and find out what they were doing. And a woman pulled me aside after the first quarter or so, and she said, I love what you're trying to do here. And the language was important. It wasn't like, I love the class and I learned from Johnny. It was like, I get that you're trying to do something special, and I feel that, and I care about it. And so, somebody came up with a slogan, aging with attitude, and that went right up on the wall. It was like, kind of characterized what we were talking about. It was like, come in here, use the technology, but it's not about the tech. And increasingly it became about these amazing stories that were emerging, people starting businesses and people, finding old army buddies from the Korean War and doing reunions, and people writing memoirs and story events, and people. Like one guy wrote a musical play. I guess it was a musical performance that he wrote, and it was before the movie came out. It was it was called The Green Book, where people would go around the South and you couldn't stay at regular hotels. And he had experienced it, an African American guy, and he wrote this musical about it, and they wanted to workshop it. So we brought all the technology in, and he workshopped it, and then we broadcast that around the country to different senior centers. And it just showcased people's creativity and what people were doing with tech. So that center became a kind of a starting point for a much broader movement around aging and tech. And we shifted our focus and changed the mission to say that we harness technology to change the way we age. So we were not so much, I kind of woke up one day and I was like, I don't really care how many people use Microsoft products. It's not, I'm working for a nonprofit. I don't want to devote my whole life to becoming the tech support program that these big companies should have had without me in the first place, but here we're sort of filling a gap. What's really exciting here is that there's the longevity revolution happening at the same time as the technology revolution. We're adding all these years to the human lifespan. And I think sometimes about it a little bit like Battery Park City, because when the city of New York began digging the subways, they had all this extra dirt and they just threw it over on the Hudson side of Manhattan downtown. And it was just this big open field that was new, that wasn't even there 20 or 30 years before, but suddenly we had all this land available, but nobody knew what to put there. It was completely new. And so we started doing kind of urban planning processes around it. And eventually they came up with Battery Park City, which was a pretty good answer to the challenge at the time. And I think about aging a little bit that way. We've added all these years to the human lifespan, but we haven't yet really started filling in what we're doing about it. Older adults are doing all sorts of cool stuff, and they're racing, golf carts in Florida, and starting like 60% of new entrepreneurs are older, and they're carrying their communities and doing all this cool stuff. But we don't. All of our education funds are front-loaded in our lives, so people don't really tend to naturally go back to college at 60, which would make a lot of sense these days. A lot of our service programs are oriented around kind of frailty and dependence, but that's just not really that doesn't capture what's really going on for people. And so the technology creates an opportunity to do more and do better. And so we're exploring some of those outcomes. And at OATS, we found kind of 5 major areas where people are really getting results. One is, most obviously, social engagement, right? You've got tech as the big convener. So we have millions and millions of people coming on for Facebook and things like that. But you also get financial security, both income and managing household finances. We did a project at Queensbridge Houses where we knocked on every single senior-headed household door in Queensbridge, which is like the largest public housing program in North America. And we asked people what they wanted, and a lot of them wanted financial security training, and virtually no one had ever done a household budget. And so we actually designed a kind of budget and financial program together with people. We got it funded by a local bank, Citi, in that case, and built this really cool program that people really used to help manage their finances, and people had never looked at their income and expenses and had a chance to do that. So a lot of it was really empowering. We found real opportunities in health, of course, health and wellness and fitness, and then creative expression and civic participation, which is kind of being politically active. That initiative grew to first a statewide footprint. We started looking at other states, and we began expanding. We expanded into Denver, where we started another center. We expanded into Texas and San Antonio, and Maryland in Montgomery County. And about 6 years ago, we had been working at it for about 4 or 5 years and grown quite a bit, but not hugely. There's not a lot of resources available for this stuff. There's no national program for tech and seniors. So we were kind of cobbling together funding from New York City and San Antonio and private funders and banks and whoever we could get it from. We got a call from AARP, and they were saying, we are looking for ways to expand our program capability, and we don't want to have to invent it from scratch. We're looking for nonprofit sort of affiliates, almost like a corporate merger, but in the nonprofit sector, it's an affiliation. And they selected us as a partner, and after a year of negotiating, we decided to become an AARP affiliate. There's only 4 affiliates in the nation, and we're the only tech one, so we have a kind of a lane there. And so I'll snapshot to the present. Our impact has grown almost 20 times from before in 2019, before we joined up. Now, part of that is because COVID happened and Zoom happened. So our channel became much more robust, and we were able to get our curriculum out to 500,000 people that we couldn't reach every year now. Last year, we served 670,000 visitors. And about 500,000 roughly were in the online space. So we have Senior Planet is no longer just a center, it's seniorplanet.org. And all the way through to the current day, we still don't charge older adults for classes. So if you or your elderly friends or relatives want to go online tonight and take a class or tomorrow, yes.
How old is an older adult?
We like to let you self-define. So we target people over 60. The average Senior Planet participant is between 70 and 75, depending on the location. Online, it's about 70. In person, it's usually 75, 76. But we allow people 50 and up to join classes in person. We don't check IDs. But we do try to celebrate aging. So we tip our orientation toward the older population around 65, 75, because that group often doesn't get programs in the aging space. There is more available for people in the 50 to 60 crowd. So they're, served. So Senior Planet is, you don't have to have registration. We are redoing the website this year. I think we're still not gonna have registration. We want it to be as friction-free as possible. If you go to the center on 25th Street, you'll notice there's no elevator because we wanted it to be fully accessible from the sidewalk. The new space on 30th Street, no elevator because it's fully accessible from the sidewalk. We opened a center in Miami and Wynwood, which is a very non-traditional place for a senior technology program, but it's also a really powerful statement about where the center of Miami's creativity and technology programming is. So people said, why would you do something for older adults in Wynwood? It's like where all the cool young people are. And I was like, because people like you are gonna ask that question. And it really challenged people to realize that Miami is not just like rich in this neighborhood and poor over here, it's so segregated. There's a huge number of people living in those communities that are getting kind of pushed out or gentrified, and they're looking for programs. And so the center of Miami is double the numbers that we were predicting, and it's challenging New York for, we're getting about, I think, close to 100 people a day coming through there, and we have incredible testimonials, and the city of Miami has a thing called Tech Equity Miami, which is a neat funding model that brings together corporate funders and community partners. And so they gave us some money to do a project on small business that's partly funded by JP Morgan Chase this year. And there's just been a lot of momentum going in there. And the mayor's office is bringing people from the Parks Department, and there's a lot of vitality there. So we've got the website. The website has a call center associated with it. So if you go to seniorplanet.org, I never remember the name of the number of the call center. I don't know why I have a mental block about it, but it is on the front page of the website. It is free. 9 to 8 p.m. 9 Eastern time, people can call with their tech questions, and we don't. And so, like, you ask, like, what is a tech question? It's like, you let me know what you have, and we'll see if we can come up with a solution to it. And people seem to really benefit from it. I get a lot of postcards and emails from people saying, oh my God, they were actually patient with me, and they helped me solve the problem, and it has become a real resource. We serve tens of thousands of people a year on the call center. We have 160 locations where OATS personnel go out and teach around the country, typically around where we have the centers. So New York, Denver, Miami, Northern California, San Jose, Montgomery County, San Antonio, did I say that already? And those are the main areas. And then we realized that we have more resources available than we can specifically deploy with our staff. We have like 2,500 pages of curriculum. And a lot of it's more than half of the curriculum is available in Spanish and Chinese. And now we've got Vietnamese and Haitian Creole to add to it. So there's a lot of content available. And it would be irresponsible of us to think that our staff should be out there only teaching that curriculum and no one else could ever use it, right? Because there are 11,000 senior centers in the United States alone, not counting low-income housing developments, multi-service agencies, health organizations that are out there. There's just an endless group of community partners. And so we created a thing called Senior Planet Licensing that originally we were trying to figure out how to get the partners to pay for it. That turned out to be, again, challenging because a lot of the best partners are the ones that have the least money. So we decided to make that free as well. So now we have 480 community partners in 37 states that license our curriculum. We give you a 5-week training, and then once we're comfortable that you know the curriculum and the model, you get the curriculum. It just downloads all the materials, the outreach stuff, the translations, the trainer guides, and then people report back how many people they served and satisfaction around. We use a net promoter score measure, which is kind of a corporate way of measuring whether you like it or not, and then we do some surveys and research around that. So. We've got a huge kind of what I think of as a pretty robust community site program as well. And we work with AARP, so we get to work with all 50 state offices. We get to work with their team in Washington where we want to. They're a little bit more bureaucratic than we are, but they're also doing really great work, and they're really true believers in trying to help older people succeed and get access to more resources. So having them kind of supporting us financially a little bit, and then also really being good partners for a lot of the programs has enabled us to reach a lot more people. So that's the arc of OATS. That's the snapshot of where we are. The new headquarters is on 30th Street between 7th and 8th. We're up there Tuesdays and Thursdays working our butts off. And so you got me on the right day of the week here. From 25th Street, which is also free of charge to people and available. Talk about data and research as well. And then just very briefly, I think I have 3 minutes. Am I doing okay? My timekeeper has wandered out of the room, so I'm doing fine. Tom, are you? And so what we've learned around sort of special considerations with older adults, we're doing a project right now where we're interviewing gerontologists, and people often say, "Oh, I've developed this new app or this new device," and you say, "Oh, that's wonderful." And they say it's for seniors. You say, "Oh, that's great. Tell me the story of how you came to develop this thing." My fill-in-the-blank older relative was afflicted by the fill-in-the-blank medical challenge, and then I served them as a caretaker for a number of years and was traumatized by that. And I learned that technology could help them. And so I developed this usually sensor-based program or some device or program to help them. And now I'm launching it through some kind of competition to gain funding. And then I say, "So how did you test it with older adults?" And they, "Well, I tested it on my relative and they said it's great." And you end up with a kind of, we can do more with that. So we should actually have a whole process around it and do test bedding. At Senior Planet, we now do test beds for people that are developing new products and services so that you can bring them to the center, and we do a survey. We try to do a kind of a triage of what's most useful and helpful, and then we test that out, and people give feedback, and it helps people design products better, and it helps us do better. Whoops, I'm sorry. It helps us do better training. So that our stuff is more relevant to the end users. But it turns out that most older adults, most developers don't test stuff. Well, they don't test stuff at all in the first place, but they also don't test it on older adults. So we worked with AARP a while back to create a guide for technology design for designers that are doing tech design for older adults, special considerations. And we looked at things like co-design is critical. You really need to immerse yourself with older folks to understand what their, they call it job to be done, or what their user experience needs might be. But start from almost like an anthropological frame of mind, like sit down and observe, and then maybe ask a few questions, and then observe some more, and then think a little bit about what might be helpful, and then design the product upward from the user need, and you might come up with something that gets deployed and might sustain. And so we've been trying to create kind of an approach to that, and encouraging people to talk to gerontologists or people that have long-term expertise in the field. We realize that we haven't done that systematically ourselves. So we're interviewing a dozen gerontologists this week and next, and we did 4 of them this week. And what makes, some of the things that they really called out were really interesting. One thing was, people pointed out that when you work with young people, you know where to find them. They're all in schools. If you go to the public schools and then you add some private schools, you're going to get a good swath of where the K-12 people are. When you try to find older adults in a community, they're not in schools. They're all over the place. It's incredibly fragmented. There isn't one institutional place where everybody's going to pass through at any given time. So you have to think about senior centers. Well, do you know what percent of New Yorkers go to a senior center in any given year? It's somewhere around 5%. Sometimes I hear 6%, sometimes I hear 3%. It's not a huge number. And so most older adults are not in the senior centers. And they're in community sites and things like that, but they're not always in institutional spaces. And so you have to find different throughputs to get people in various different places. So the licensing program that we have, we license to any non-commercial entity. So we've got libraries, we've got housing groups, we've got YMCAs, we've got urban league groups, we've got anybody who can put 25 older adults in a room will work with you. But part of the model is you have to find the channels that are really diverse to reach people. Secondly, there's an enormous hunger and demand for focusing on health and wellness. Right now, we put lots of curriculum online and watch who attends what and what the ratings are. Our fitness programs are so popular that it's like literally a problem. And we run a thing called Morning Stretch, which is our sort of best program in the morning. We had a guy named Kaz who was running the fitness program here on 25th Street in person. When we went online, Kaz went online. Turns out Kaz is like Mr. Rogers online with this fitness program. People cannot get enough of this guy. And so it was like, there's 50 people a day at the new Zoom class. I was like, 50 people, that's a lot. Now it's 100. It's like the 100 people. Then it was 300. Last week it was 850. Like, it's just really a very popular, and it's called Morning Stretch. People go on, they love the program. You got to see him. He's like kind of Eastern influenced, but he also does a little martial arts stuff. it's just something about it is hypnotic. And so very, very successful programs around fitness. And it's not just that one class. There's so many people coming to fitness classes that we have to try to diversify out of them a little bit to make sure that the other things that we care about are getting touched. So we do open mic night. We do programs around songwriting for people. We do virtual travel is super popular where people, we have a live person who's doing the guiding. We did like the Great Wall of China. We did one in Central America recently. And then people log on and they go through the tour with a camera and they can ask questions, interact with the guide in real time. And the group is together as a group through Zoom. It's really kind of fun. And so programming like that is really active for people. And then there's a lot of program on AI is super popular. We work with OpenAI. I know, don't throw bricks at me, but they've been really helpful with us and helped us build curriculum. And then we're re-granting to community organizations around the country with OpenAI's money, helping them learn how to teach classes kind of on the grassroots level to see what works and what's helpful for people. So we're learning a lot about what people are interested in. The vast majority of older adults, it may not be a secret to people in this room, are perfectly capable of learning the technology. You have to understand where people are starting. Some people are still really beginners with some of it or have anxiety around it. And we live in such an ageist society and there's so many negative messages coming to people around aging and tech that you have to overcome that by just relieving people of the stress, saying, we'll stay with you as long as you stay with us. And no one has ever not learned this stuff if you continue the class. And there's no test and it's not very stressful. But we really learn to make it relevant and methodologically appropriate for people. And we've had a lot of success getting people to keep coming. So we're still growing. Budget's around $20 million this year. We've got 80 staff. And it's been quite a journey. So I'll stop there because I want to make sure we give them a chance for some Q&A and comments from people. Did I do okay, Ben? All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. We've already got a lot of questions online from YouTube. We'll be able to take questions until about 8:30. So thank you, Tom, for giving us a lot of time.
Sure.
Anyone have a question here in the room first?
Jolie. Oh, go ahead. Here, I'll let you do
We'll
it.
take it to Jolly back here. Okay.
Okay, let me just switch the camera here. There, I did it. Our focus of this group is accessibility and disability.
Yep.
And, the growing population of people with disabilities is obviously the aging population. Do you have any particular programs to help people deal with, oncoming disabilities and learning to screen readers or cognitive disabilities?
We do. It's relatively limited at OATS, and I'll explain why. We do programs periodically around adaptive devices. We'll do a session where we'll bring people in that are experts in hearing adaptive devices or visual impairment resources for people. We'll do workshops on it, but people sort of come out of curiosity. The most popular of those programs is around hearing, which seems to have the largest kind of most broad impact for the population that we're working with. And we also train people, all the volunteers and the center staff, to be good with adaptive devices on phones and on the PCs and laptops. Most of the things that we come up with are of the level of challenge where there's somebody that has an impairment, but they're still able to show up at the center by themselves. And so they're mobile, they're able to function in a group, but they may need a higher contrast keyboard or higher contrast screen setting. They may need seating at the front of the room, or we'll set somebody up with a mic and a headphone set so that they can hear the speaker better. And then we get to the point where you've got people that have more severe impairments. And our position on this is that disability and aging are kind of sister enterprises, but they are separate in some ways. And I have a pretty severely disabled teenager that I am a caretaker for, and she's 18 years old, and she's dealing with a lot of the issues around disability that older people may have around mobility, but that has nothing to do with her age, right? But they're all dealing with wheelchairs and elevators and the kinds of things that we're handling. I spent some time at the Lighthouse Guild last week, and we did a tour there. And when they mentioned Ira's I don't know if people have ever used Ira, but I think Ira is one of the coolest things in the world. It's just, it allows you to, you kind of tip it or turn it on, and there's a live person looking through a camera that can tell you what you're looking at. And I've walked around Manhattan with a friend of mine from the CTA Foundation, Matt, if anybody knows him, and he showed me what Ira was showing him. And so some of these accessibility tools are amazing, but they're very distinctive to the user, and there are organizations that are really good at deploying them, that are expert in that. So what we've done is worked with groups like Lighthouse Guild, or have come in and do workshops, and we'll do a lot of back and forth handoffs where somebody needs the expertise that they have, and it's beyond our scope to be able to deliver it well. So we know where to go with something, and we know how to support the network, but we try not to overreach with what we're doing and try to do their work, and they tend to bring people to us when they know that they're feeling it as an aging person as well as somebody with a disability, and we're really celebrating that aging experience for people. So it's a pretty good collaboration, but it's not a specialization of ours.
Great, thank you. Now we're going to take a question from out there on YouTube. How can we volunteer with this program? How can you volunteer?
So the easiest way to follow up for random questions, and that's not a random question, but for things that I don't have a resource in front of me for, is if you email info@oats.org, you will go to the central mailbox, put at the top, Tom said to email you about, and you will immediately get their attention, which they would anyways, but it's always helpful. And so we do have volunteer opportunities. They are often at the centers, and so if you're located in New York and you want to come to the center and do some volunteering, we definitely work with volunteers. I will say that we tend to use volunteers in a pretty intensive way, so people often come in for like 10 hours a week or more, and they get trained and they're responsible for really doing different elements of it. We have a volunteer group that does digital volunteers as well that I just spent an hour with last week. There's about 20 of them, and they're doing kind of coaching online for people as well. So if you mentioned that you wanted to connect with the volunteer group online, that's run by Fiona Adams. And if you want to connect to the local sites in New York, Denver, Miami, or San Antonio would be the places we've got enough capacity to really work with volunteers.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
All right, take your question over here.
And we use corporate volunteers as well. If you work for a big company and you want to volunteer, we will ask your company to write us a check, and then you will have the opportunity to volunteer. Welcome to sustainability.
Well, that is a good way to get funding and stuff like that, which you mentioned earlier. I was just curious because you mentioned having a hard time identifying where to find older adults in general. Do you guys consider partnering with community-based organizations in different neighborhoods? You tend to find this more in the outer boroughs of Manhattan. But generally, you will find older adults more engaged in those things, especially family enrichment centers tend to engage older adults, and they often are looking for programming possibilities. Yep. Some of them do get grants to do older adult inclusion, but if you have this great curriculum and you're looking to distribute it, that'd probably be a great distribution opportunity.
That's a great idea. We do a lot of work with, we have a kind of a roster of community organizations in all 5 boroughs that we work with in New York. We work with I think currently about 45 groups in the city every year. But there's a lot more groups than we're currently connecting with. So if there's somebody in a neighborhood that you think is particularly a good fit, send them our way, and we'd be happy to. I've got a team that goes out and does the kind of vetting. And
have you guys tried the community boards rep?
We don't need to because we've got too many partners that are already out there. I mean, I used to be on Community Board 6 in Brooklyn, so I know the networks. We also work a lot with the Department for the Aging in New York, which is there's 230 senior centers in the city. They have a whole sort of list of them, and then they sort of prioritize based on both capacity on the one side, but also need on the other. There's some of the centers don't have any resources like outside. So
the idea is to let them know about this resource because I'm from Brooklyn Community Board 5.
Yeah, give them the mic.
The idea is to spread awareness of the fact that this is an option because I've never heard of this program, and I'm involved with Community Board 5, which has one of the larger populations of older adults.
Oh, we'd love to. Send a note, and we'll send a person to give you a presentation. We've got a guy that does that.
Perfect. Making connections at our meetup.
You're right next door to us. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So we have a question from online. This is from our technical audience. Is the curriculum available in a way that is Web Content Accessibility Guideline AA compliant?
It's a good question. I knew I was going to get this one. We teach, the curriculum is downloaded, is taught in classrooms with books. And so people print it out. We have had many places that do sign language interpretation in the classroom. We have places that do that do printouts with different size fonts and things like that. But it's really a paper curriculum for that purpose. The online classes are Zoom, and so we're limited to some degree to the capabilities of Zoom, but the captioning is available, of course, and things like that. We don't get a lot of requests for additional adaptation from that. The website itself conforms somewhat to the more modern versions of the adaptability standards. And I work with the AARP team. I was just down there harassing them about this last quarter because I knew I was going to come here and talk to you guys. And so I went and talked to the guy that runs the AARP website, and he said, these are the various things that we've been doing to upgrade it lately, so they're making an effort. I don't think any of us are there yet in terms of the level of website adaptability that we think we need to have, frankly.
Okay, take a question here.
The new center that you're opening, is that larger, more services? What's the difference? The new center you open on 30th Street?
It's a little bit larger, and it's we wanted a space where we could have the team of staff that work at headquarters was always in Brooklyn, in Gowanus, and then the program site was on 25th Street. The 25th Street site is a little bit small now. We need about 3,000 square feet, and that's closer to 2. And then the team in the headquarters was always kind of moving back and forth and not able to participate in the programs very well. So we realized when the real estate market in Manhattan is actually relatively affordable for commercial spaces right now. So we were able to find a space at it's like $75 a square foot. It's not very expensive. So we realized that we had an opportunity kind of once in a generation to be able to pick a larger space at about the same price point and bring the team in to be on top of them. So we're relocating to 30th Street. It's also a little closer to the subway. And we know the transportation hub element increases the numbers. So it's this year we're financially, it won't pay off, but in the next 5 years, I think eventually it'll make a lot of sense. And the space is beautiful. Double height ceiling, balconies.
Let's all go. All right, we got a question from online. You talked about the curriculum being available in other languages.
Yep.
How much does OATS engage seniors in communities where English is not their primary language?
It's one of our specialties. We do it a lot. I mean, the space in Miami, they speak Spanish more than they speak English. I speak Spanish, so I'm pretty committed to it. When we were really expanding outside of our first initial program sites, we went to the Bronx because that's where my network was. And so we spent a lot of time at Castle Hill Senior Center up in the Bronx and Rain and a lot of the Spanish-speaking sites. So Spanish was kind of a sweet spot for us for a long time. We taught in New York in Russian. We did a whole bunch of stuff on trauma-informed care. So we spent a lot of time with Russian immigrants for a while. And in Northern California, we've got a really strong program in San Jose, which is primarily Asian languages, where English is definitely a second language for folks. We had a guy from China there, kind of an intense story. About a couple of months ago, we were teaching a course in a community center. I think it's, I'm blanking on the name of the group. I know the acronym. But they're mostly Chinese language center. Gentleman from China was there. He learned how to put his emergency contact on his, I guess he had an Apple Watch, and set it for the automatic fall detection, and put his building super as his emergency contact, went home, a few days later had a catastrophic fall in the apartment, was severely injured, and the watch called the super broke down the door, they called the ambulance, they came and rescued this guy, and 3 weeks, we didn't know, he didn't come to class for a few weeks, and he came back, and the trainer's name is Effie Zhang, and he came in, he said, I just need to say something to the class, and he told that story and said, this saved my life, and stuff like that can kind of make you form, that you're making a difference there. But I'm really proud that more than half the curriculum now is in languages other than English. Haitian Creole in Miami we teach classes there, and we've had some traction with that program. Vietnamese in San Jose is now up and running, and Chinese actually in Montgomery County, Maryland, for some reason, which is not a place what I would have thought as like a hotbed of Chinese speakers, but there's a lot of Chinese speakers in Montgomery County, Maryland. So we've been teaching a 10-week course there that got funded by the county, and then we use that to spread the program around the country.
That's great.
It's a priority for us.
Great. Eric.
Thank you for this talk. It's been incredible. I'm curious if you think there's a future where tech companies are doing more to proactively design for aging populations, and if there would be partnership with you all of sharing best practices or being able to have a relationship with this community and share feedback in a more directed way.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, it's already happening at some level. There's all these networks out there now. Like AARP has a thing called the Age Tech Collaborative, where they have all these tech companies that come together to talk about aging and the aging market and how to work with people. They've got access to startups. The startups are coming in, getting startup funding and pitching things, and they're getting, able to accelerate programs. So there's something happening there. New York City, there used to be a group called Aging 2.0, which was an international network of groups that were promoting sort of age-positive corporate and tech programs. And they had a lot of sort of pitch events and programs where companies were coming in and interacting with them. Some of the tech companies, like there's a group called Intuition Robotics that developed a social robot called the LEQ, and they spent a lot of time testing that out with older adults and working with gerontologists and community partners around it. So there's stuff happening. We tend to work with some of the larger corporations because it's just sort of where I need to go get money, and but we'll work with like a Comcast, and you'd be surprised how open they are to us telling them what people want and bringing groups of people down to test stuff out. We brought people to the Google headquarters when they were doing Google Translate and did a bunch of workshops with older adults there testing it and giving them feedback. And the participants are not shy. They're like, oh, I hate this feature, that isn't working at all. You know, they really give real good feedback. Sony brought some engineers to our center to test, kind of run some of their prototype stuff a few years ago to show people that. So I think there's some interest. The issue for a lot of them is that they're still unaware of the value of the market to some degree. There's this tendency to think that the older adult market isn't lucrative enough or people don't spend money as much. So we have to kind of educate them that there's a market there and there's a profit to be made. Regulation matters to some degree. So if they're in a regulatory environment, the telecoms companies particularly, but the health companies. So Medicare Advantage now has a requirement that they have a health equity component to their Medicare Advantage plans. So if you are trying to access your health information or your health services, and there's a disparity that can be identified with a specific demographic, then they're required to address it. And if they don't, it dings their star rating, and the star rating triggers the reimbursement rates from CMS. So we're talking about hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars at stake for making sure that the stuff is accessible broadly to different populations. Older adults particularly have challenges with accessing healthcare information through the technology lens. And so United works with us, for example, as an on-ramp for people that are struggling to get access to their United information. They just send them to us and we train them how to use the stuff, and we put them on the hotline and make sure that they can get access to the stuff. So it's valuable for them. It allows us to reach more people with the services and programs. So it is happening a little bit. There's a lot. I'm sorry, you told me not to have long answers. There's a lot more to go here. I mean, I think we're 2% where we need to go, but it's not totally nowhere.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ben. I promised you I wouldn't do that. He said like 1 minute answers.
Yeah, you're doing it. We have so many questions, which is awesome. So let's take this one here. What proportion of engagement is in real life versus virtual or like online?
About 80-20 right now.
Okay.
Roughly. Could be 75-25, something like that.
So it was lovely to hear about this whole evolutionary arc and how somewhere in there you discovered for yourself the beauties of essentially what we would call UX research and user-centered design, and how that was kind of a revelation. So that's lovely to hear. But then you said something in passing, and I was, I figured you must have some reason for saying this. You said that adults age 60 really should be going back to college.
Yes.
Were you just tossing that off, or is there something behind that?
No, I think that, I spend a lot of time with people that are more sort of broad geriatric experts or gerontologist experts that are studying sort of human life patterns. And what we're finding is that, I'll break my own rule. Oops, sorry, I will not touch the microphone again. I'll break my own rule and I'll reference my own family for a second. My grandparents, when they turned 60 or 65, were thinking, oh, our life expectancy is maybe another 10 or 15 years max. And so they were already looking to kind of wind down their careers and see about a little bit of maybe 5 years of leisure before their health may start to fail. And today, not only the lifespan is a lot longer, but the health span is a lot longer. People are more able to get around. Mobility is a lot better for people, despite the fact that a lot of people are struggling financially and need a lot more help. There is a general population of older people that are thriving, and yet they're reaching there's a tendency for a lot of people to reach the sort of late career phase in their late 50s and early 60s where they may be kind of done with what they've been doing for the last 20 or 25 years. A lot of people are, union employees, they get their 20 years in. I can't tell you how many bus drivers and school teachers and folks that we teach that come in looking for their sort of next act. And they're not able, it's not traditionally normal for people in America anyways, to then say, okay, now I'm 60 and I'm going to retire, so I'm going to go for a 2-year college program now and enhance my skills for the next phase that I'm going to do. I'm particularly interested in woodworking, right? So if I was going to do my next phase, I would go take a woodworking and design class to be able to build furniture. It's what I'm interested in. But there isn't like, there's not like a big swelling of people going to do that, and there isn't a lot of government funding and loans and Pell Grants and stuff that are designed for people in their 60s. There are schools that have programs for people that are older, and there are a lot of older adults that are going back to school despite the tendency of the sort of oddness of sitting next to a bunch of 25-year-olds in the classroom. But I think it would actually be a good pattern for us to start building more infrastructure for people to be more intentional about building their skill set for the next phase of life. There's an organization called Modern Elder Academy that's in Santa Fe and down in Baja, California, that does amazing sort of next phase visioning programs for people that are looking for their next kind of project or something to work on. And there's also stuff around social connection. The data around social engagement for older adults is really pretty stark. And so a lot of people, you see your social networks attenuating because friends die, you leave the workforce, so the workforce relationships start to go, your kids move away, so the parent relationships that you might have had start to evaporate or attenuate. So we need to actually add more energy into building social contact for people, and we don't have systems for it. There aren't like a natural, it's not like, oh, everybody goes to camp in the summer. So we need to find ways to do that. I don't really know the answer to it, but I'm sort of alluding to this notion that we need more social infrastructure. I could go longer, but I'm not allowed to. Ask me a follow-up. Come back with a follow-up.
Yeah, we'll go back to online.
We did a 1-week camp for older people where they made friends using technology, which was really cool. It's called Senior Planet After Hours. So we're trying to do that kind of stuff. How many people were at? It was limited to 12, but we could do it. I would do it 1,000 times if we could. I loved it.
Do you have a service or an idea for people to bring in technology to be used or evaluated, sort of like a usability session with any of the?
You mean like something that they already own, or something that they're?
I guess more like a company or an organization.
Yeah,
can
we
bring
do. So
something.
we have a test bed program. There's a woman named Julia who works out of the DC office with AARP, and we have you basically apply for the test bed if you're interested in doing something. We'll look at it. We'll evaluate whether we think it's. I mean, there's a kind of prima facie, like, do we like this thing? Mm-hmm. Does it work? And then we'll try to fit it in if we can find a place to test it out and try that. Yeah.
Great. Take a question from the back.
Do you see AI bots with generative AI where special LLMs are being designed for older people to learn courses and expand the technology infrastructure to have more people doing your programs?
I do. Yes, so that is one of our competitive set challenges. I think the AI bots are, to the extent that if something is getting solved, then we don't have to solve that. We can focus on something else. And there's a fairly large kind of landscape of things that we'd like to be working on. So we just were doing a planning session today, and the staff upvoted and downvoted the priorities for the year. And there's just a lot on the table. So if an AI bot's going to come out of the gate and do something that's so fantastic that it's just as good as what we would be doing with a live trainer, I'm happy to seed the ground. So far, it hasn't gotten there yet, and I've never lost betting against technology. People thought that a lot of this stuff was going to be self-solving for years, and that it was going to get so easy that nobody would have to worry about. Do you remember interoperability with EHRs? Does anybody around for that whole process? The idea was like, we're going to digitize medical records. That was 2006, right? And everything's going to get digitized. And now that it's digitized, we're going to set some standards so that it all talks to itself, and it's going to be a unified platform. And there was health exchanges. Remember that? And so I worked a lot on this. There were these health exchanges. There's a thing called HealthX. It's still out there, I believe. And they were supposed to draw this data. Consumers were going to be in charge of it. We were going to control our medical data. And it was everyone you ever talked to, every doctor, they were going to share that so you could know what your blood pressure was 5 years ago and what somebody prescribed to you, and you could get, are you kidding me? None of that stuff got solved. And we were still like, you can't get access to anything. Like, I can barely get my doctor to answer my, basic questions. And so the technology solution, I'm still waiting for my self-driving car to get me to the Catskills. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't eventuated. I'm not yet worried about getting out-competed by the tech industry. Maybe that's an arrogant answer, but it's just been my experience.
Well, on that
I
note,
have a good staff, a good team.
I think that's a great place to end the presentation, tonight's Q&A. So thank you so much, Tom, for the
appreciate it.
presentation.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. Website, oats.org for corporate, seniorplanet.org for participants, info@oats.org if you have a general question. And I'm on LinkedIn if people want to send me messages, but I'm totally crappy about answering them. Just info@oats.org, you get to me. Thank you. I love you guys.
So-
I'd like to come back sometime. This is great.
We will be staying around here for till about 9, so feel free to socialize in the room. For those of you on the stream, thank you so much for joining. Thank you everyone here also for joining. Yeah. There's IRA, AKQA, Events, Equal Entry, Fable, and DQ. And we want to say thank you again to all the people that help us make this event accessible and available. So thank you to Jolly McPhee for our YouTube stream and live production, Flip Wilson for the ASL, captioning for Mirror by Night, my co-organizer Ben Ogilvy, Merrill Evans, and Cameron Kundiff, and Irina Morozova. So thank you, everyone. Our next event will be March 4th, first Tuesday of March, and we will be having a presentation from the founders of Fable on usability testing and specifically focused on cognitive disabilities. Thank you, everyone. See you at another event.